Hey guys, and thank you for joining us today for another Cyber Talk with me, Julia Lee, Senior Manager of the Education and Center of Excellence Unit within the Cybersecurity Division of the Ontario Public Service. Well, last month in March was Women's History Month, and in May we celebrated Mother's Day. And finally, at the beginning of May, CyberX hosted the 2022 Canadian Women's Cybersecurity Conference, the Women's Conference of the Year, I think. And now you can probably see where this really joins up in our discussion, focusing on diversity and inclusion within cybersecurity. Of course, the Ontario Public Service, we continue to make its efforts in closing the talent gap and really promoting equal opportunities for everyone, no matter gender, sexuality, ethnicity, culture, ability, or background. But I think joining me today is a familiar face that most of us know, Shelley Wark-Martyn. She is the Business Development and Brand Ambassador for SANS. Shelley spent over the past 20 years in business development, training and strategically building strong organizations, also working very closely with individuals, corporations, and government agencies and associations across North America to really understand the training needs for our cybersecurity workforce and how to meet these needs. Shelley, it was we had the privilege of hearing some of your stories and advice at that Canadian Women in Cybersecurity Conference earlier this month, and we had previously had the opportunity to chat about mentorship and cyber talent gap when we first launched Cyber Talk, and we've loved her so much. We're bringing her back on to hear more from her today. So, I think at this part here, let's get started.
Okay.
Great. So our first question is, what led you to pursue a career in cybersecurity, and how has your experience been working in this field, Shelley?
Well, I didn't pursue a career in cybersecurity. I think that's the first thing. I think in the cybersecurity world, because it's still fairly new to a lot of people, it's new to our education system. So depending on where you are across this nation, the ability for someone to even open that door for you may be more limited than in other places. Um, so for me, I was sought out by SANS as someone they wanted to hire because of my communication skills and my business development skills. So it had nothing to do with technology, with cybersecurity, with knowing how to hack, knowing how to turn on a computer. It was all about, you're a great communicator. We would love to have you at SANS. And so that was a process for me to understand, why do they want to hire me? I don't understand their website. I don't know what language they're speaking. I've never heard of SANS before. I needed to do my research and my homework as well. But something that has allowed me to have tremendous opportunities in life has been the belief that people see things in me that I don't see in myself. So believing that people may ask me to do something, and most people don't ask you to do something because they think you're going to fail. They ask you to do something because they see success in your ability to do that task or to do that role. So after quite a few discussions and me doing my research, I said, sure, let me get on this bus and join this ride and see where it takes me. Well, almost 9 years later, um, I've been in the cybersecurity field. I am still not a pen tester or know how to pen test, but I do talk to customers all over the world about cybersecurity, about growing their cybersecurity teams, about what do your cybersecurity teams look like.
That's wonderful, and thanks for sharing your background. It's definitely a very unique background there, and it really goes to show that in cybersecurity, it's not always. I think we've talked about this previously as well, right? It's not always the traditional methods of thinking that you need that technical background to get into the field of cybersecurity. But Shelley, in terms of just for folks who might have not joined the Canadian Women in Cybersecurity Conference earlier this month, can you share a little bit of how it felt to be surrounded by so many people championing women and really the importance of cybersecurity and diversity? And what was your biggest takeaway from the conference?
Well, in hindsight, and I tend to be a very reflective person, and I had the opportunity to chair the conference, but also to be the MC for the first day of the conference. So that really allowed me to really see, what does this audience look like? What does this room look like? What does it feel like? And for me, um, it gave me great joy to be in a room that was inclusive, full of diversity, um, full of people from very, very like young people in college and high school to people who are older, because ageism is also a role that we have in our society that is like questionable at times. And for me, it was wow, we've done a great job of making everyone feel welcome at CyberX and the CyberX events. There's a place for everybody. And, I worked on some of the things behind the scenes where we had, groups that wanted to come, they couldn't afford the entrance. And, Maudie and the team at CyberX are like, we've got to make it so everybody can come, everybody can be a part of this. So for me, I was, and that work is different work. It's not something we're used to, right? Usually you see a conference, you want to go. It's like, I can't afford it. Oh, I can't go like that. I can't travel. How do I get there? And, they arranged everything so that most people, if they wanted to get there, had a way to get there. And that was impressive. And I think that's part of, how do you want to create a workplace that is reflective of your community and inclusive, and have equity? You got to be able to respond to all those questions. And the people who are asking those questions have to feel comfortable asking them. So it was great. I would have to say it is one of the only events that I have gone to where I really felt, wow, we have done everything to make a difference and to allow all people to feel comfortable and be there and learn from each other. So it was incredible. It really was incredible.
I completely agree with the last piece there, Shelley, in terms of it was definitely an honor for me to sit on the advisory board and be part of this great team, and especially being a female and connecting with other women in our industry to really listen in terms of share challenges, but also kind of the work and the great work that's underway that's impacting all agencies or organizations, public or private, wherever you come from. We all have shared challenges on this front.
Yeah. It was an awesome couple of days, and I'm looking forward to the next event.
I did get the opportunity to meet a lot of students who were still a little bit unsure about the cybersecurity field and wanted to really tap into what does it look like in a day in your life. And those are definitely the right questions that I think folks who are still navigating throughout their career journey to certainly ask in that space. And in terms of just the piece about, how do we engage folks virtually, in person? How do we get engagement from folks who are attending to ask these types of questions with the right people in the room? And this event certainly had delivered, and we've delivered it successfully.
Yeah, it's I think I think it's still difficult because the people we depend on to provide that guidance in our society, um, probably have a lot of misunderstanding still in the industry and the field. Even parents of children, right? Usually parents will say, my child is spending too much time in front of the computer. And it's like, your child might be a genius and you don't even know it, right? And so there's a balance there. And so we have to communicate, that balance and being able to recognize that those are skills, because computers, didn't come to us as something that everybody loved. Most people, everything we do where we're adding something, your banking becomes computerized. Um, Most of us push back on that. No, I want to come to the bank every week and see my banker. And it's like, no, we've got a great way for you to do it now. And, I think of my mom during COVID, how they were trying to get her to get an iPhone or an Android so that she could do her banking online. Well, she just pushed it back every single time. Like, we do that as a society still when it comes to our technology.
Yeah, yeah, certainly. And on the point of just the industry, and especially let's pivot to the support for women entering this industry. According to Cybersecurity Ventures, we see that only approximately 25% of the cybersecurity workforce identifies as female. But in your opinion, what are the biggest challenges standing in the way of really the increasing representation of diverse groups in the cybersecurity space?
Um, wow, you know, I have been an advocate for women's issues since I was like 16. Like it's my whole life, different issues, different things. And sometimes I think the biggest obstacle is me or us, females. Sometimes we are our own obstacle because we don't see ourselves fitting in, or we deselect, we decide we don't want to fit in. So not wanting to fit in, I think, is okay as long as we are looking at how do we provide an alternative to be able to participate in the economy and in the industry. And it may look different than what it does today. Um, but for women, you know what? I think for women, just be bold. You just have to say it. You know, when you're at your workplace, if you're already at a workplace and they're bringing in new people, do they look like more like you in the community they serve? If not, we have to be bold and say, oh, two more, two more men to the team. Were there no women that applied? Because if there were no women, and I did talk with one organization, um, and they said, you know what, Shelley, we can't even get women to apply. And I'm like, okay, but that's not an answer. That is telling you that there's an obstacle to women applying. So what are you doing to make sure that they do apply? And so, you know, I think having bold conversations, questioning organizations and feeling comfortable doing that, historically, the only way we've made change is by, you know, upsetting the apple cart. And
Mhm.
so I say upsetting the apple cart is okay. It makes people uncomfortable. But when you're trying to do things differently and you have to be more inclusive, it is going to make things uncomfortable. And we just need to accept that that's okay. So for women out there, you know, I would say if you need support, reach out to another woman that's, you know, there's so many groups and organizations. There's WESIS there in Ontario, active chapter with a lot of strong women. Reach out and find someone to kind of hold you up while you tackle those tough questions and find that spot where you belong.
Yeah, absolutely. And very much so, especially I think in the past 2 years, safe to say, like the phenomenon has really grown. The great resignation that we've seen throughout various industries, and that includes very much cybersecurity, there's been an increase in opportunities due to the sudden transition between work from home and now everyone's going back to the workplace, but a greater reliance on digital technologies, allowing security workers to have more say when it comes to the type of job that they want. But what do you think employers could be doing to not only recruit more workers from probably underrepresented groups, but really to retain these employees as well?
Retention. Well, you know, I always say I'm only one decision or one bad comment away from, you know, finding my next opportunity. And that's true in today's world. So I think, you know, having that conversation with your employees, sometimes we take them for granted that they're just going to be there. You know, we might say they pay well, they've got a good job, they have benefits. What are they going to do? In today's world, they'll leave. I mean, I have always been the person that it's like, yeah, I don't like it here, I'm gone. I've always been that person. I've always felt that I won't live a day going to work somewhere where I don't feel there's opportunity for me for growth. I don't feel that I'm respected, or I don't feel that I have a voice. That has just been me. Um, and so I think for individuals who are in a workplace, I think you have to let it be known to your supervisor or your manager that, hey, I I would like to have a conversation about joining another team, or how do I grow up and be like you or have your role? You know, after you find out about their role, you might not want their role. Um, but it's asking those questions, and at the same time it's our managers taking time out of their day, and it's kind of fearful because you really don't want your employee to tell you that they want to move on, right? So it's a loss, especially in today's world where it's so hard to find employees. So it's like, what do I need to do to keep you here? I want you to remain on this team. And is it realistic to expect that we're going to keep people for 2, 3, 4, 5 years now? Or has that changed? I think some of that has changed. And so maybe we're looking at it all wrong when we look at retention. Is retention really something that we're going to accomplish in today's world? There's a good conversation.
That is, and that's a great topic for probably a call that's very near us. Um,
Yeah, it's
but
like
yeah,
I know
totally
a lot of
agree.
people that change workplaces because they're looking for something different. They're either looking
Yeah,
for a new culture, they're looking for a new office experience, they're looking for a new role. And it was just like, and what I find is, even at Sam's, we've had people who have left Sam's, but then they come back. They just needed to do a U-turn in their career and they needed to have a different experience. And I'm like, that we need to acknowledge that that's okay.
absolutely. And just to your point around, if you are feeling that your voice is not heard, if you're feeling like you are not adding value to whichever organization you're working at, that is probably a key indication of, maybe we need to really revisit to see, what really happened there. Why are these things occurring? And there's a greater emphasis on what are our leaders or executives looking to really provide solutions to look at those issues to retain talent, to retain those folks. And not only that is just to make sure that I think the key piece there is how do we keep people motivated? And especially in the ever-changing world that we're in, from remote to going back into the workplace, there's definitely a lot of changes that we've seen just in the past 2 years alone that does make it difficult. But I think it is a team effort in making sure that you do relay that to your leaders and become part of the solution, right?
Right. I mean, I think with and I believe we're going to have like a bit of a step here in the work from home because there's a lot of workplaces where they're not going back to the workplace, where you're not going to see people, you're not traveling as much. The travel budgets are all gone. And I'm just like, okay, but if I have to be home every day looking at my computer, but I know I could be getting on a plane now I'm bored. Now I need more, right? So I could still be a top performer, but this working by my computer every day is not working for me anymore. And so I think you're going to see some of those. I think you're going to see some good people leave organizations because organizations decided not to go back to doing things the old way, which may not all be bad, but then you still have to think about, you know, Shelley was used to getting on an airplane, being in front of a lot of people every month. Shelley's no longer doing that. How long is Shelley going to be happy just working from her office in Calgary? And you know, I sure hope organizations are looking at their workplaces and saying, okay, now what? When COVID started, there were individuals who were rock stars on their cybersecurity teams. And they were rock stars because they were in the office and they could not only do their job, but they could fix all kinds of things for everybody else. They were like the go-to person.
Yeah.
Then when they went home and worked only from home, that interaction wasn't happening anymore. And those people became bored with their jobs. And some of them left their jobs and their bosses were like, didn't see that coming. And I'm like, you sent him home? Nobody talked to him anymore that wasn't on his team. And he realized his job was a bit boring. He really liked all that interaction in the office and being able to help other teams. And that's gone. So yeah, and women working at home that have children, that's a lot of work. That is like, you know, bless all of them because that is, and men as well. That's a lot of work when you're trying to balance children and meals and in and out of school and day camps. And yeah, a lot of work. What does the workplace look like? What does the worker look like? And how do we accommodate
Absolutely.
them?
Yeah, and we're also hearing from, our side too, right? Just from employees saying, we just need time to chat with you, or we need that human interaction again, and we need to be more collaborative, right? We do think we are always thinking about innovative ways to collaborate, brainstorm ideas especially when we're doing our strategic planning exercises. However, I think it's a little bit different for everybody, right? In terms of, what's rewarding for them in a day of our workplace. And we're hearing that there's a handful of people who love the whole work from home component of it because they have the benefit of not adding the commute times in some scenarios. But there's other folks on the the other coin is saying, we do love and we do miss that, human component of being in person. And especially if their role is very engaging and very hands-on, like you said, Shelley, that's definitely a pain point. So how do organizations really meet kind of halfway for, employees who have unique circumstances, and then you've got the added challenges of, your personal life challenges that you're juggling at the same time.
Yeah, I think for me, so I've worked from home for over 20 years now. So working from home was great. Working from home during COVID was different because that involved nobody going anywhere, interacting with anyone. Like we all stayed in our bubbles. We weren't getting on airplanes. We weren't going to community events. Everything just stopped. And during that time, I think people kind of did what they needed to because that was the way it was. I think now as the world opens up and more people are saying, we need to learn to live with COVID and its impact on the world. How do we do that? I think workplaces need to figure out how do we get back to whatever our new normal is looking like? Like who's checking in with the employees to say, are you happy with your work now? Because my work is totally different than it was 3 years ago. Totally different. Um, and so, although a lot of people did not lose their income during COVID, they kept their jobs, they lost their roles. Their roles changed in that, every meeting is a Zoom meeting in a computer where you're just dealing with the agenda. You don't even get to hear that Julia got a new puppy on the weekend. And it's like, Julia likes puppies. Like you don't have any of that water cooler talk happening anymore. So I think you're going to see some more changes in the workplace. I've known of some organizations that have gone to a 4-day work week. I know a lot of people who created secondary jobs while they're working from home because all that non-commute time, non-extra chatter time has given them more time. So people are doing different things with it. Is that good or is that bad? I don't know. It depends on the workplace and the productivity that they're expecting. Is it harder for people who are women, your minorities, people still fighting for equity in the workplace? Absolutely. Because there's nowhere they're at home, they're not being seen, they're not being heard, they don't know who the players are anymore. They're not able to learn about the systems and the workplace, how it works. And so that has made it in many ways harder for individuals. How do you get recognized? How do you get seen in today's world, in today's workplace? So
Yeah, absolutely.
lots of changes.
Yeah, yeah, totally agree in terms of, how do we look at really enhancing diversity and inclusion throughout, cybersecurity and our organizations. But at the same time, how do we kind of accommodate those special needs? We've certainly seen in the past few years the pros and cons and the differences and the impacts, just like yourself, working 20 years and working from home, and it's definitely very
Right.
different in terms of how you worked during COVID or
Mhm.
during the height of the pandemic, and just rethinking, how does it work moving forward, right? I think so far, in terms of my team, going back to the workplace, it's been quite positive in terms of having that human interaction component again and working together and having those, personal talks, right? What's happened in
Right.
the last few years that we didn't get a chance to work on because we're in back-to-back meetings. At the moment you press join meeting, you're on to the agenda items, right? So
Right.
definitely very interesting to see observations, perhaps maybe a year after, when we get to the point of, how does it look like in terms of the new workplace that we're looking at today.
Yeah. Yeah. And what does that workplace look like? And, how do you get more women? Like, for me, that's the real, for me, it's kind of, it's, are we, I always wonder if we're asking the right questions. Like, how do you get more women, more diversity, more equity in the workplace? How do you do that? And maybe it's, there are some workplaces that um, I don't want to be in as a female because they don't work for me. They were set up by a bunch of men, and nothing about it works for me as a female. So therefore, I will deselect. And I think there's a lot of that in our society. And so when you look at, I remember going to some meetings, on-site meetings with different organizations, and I knew their workplace was all men when I was going. If I saw a female all day, it was probably the receptionist that welcomed me when I came through the door. But the rest of that workplace, when I toured that site, would be mostly all men. I specifically wore the brightest pink fuchsia jacket I had to those meetings because I needed to, for them to be a little uncomfortable, recognizing that, oh, she's a female in our space. And some people would catch that, right? They'd catch that, some of messaging on, oh, nobody around here wears a pink fuchsia jacket like that. I'm like, I can see that, right? And it's like a start of a conversation. So how do we get our workplaces to be more reflective, and where do we want those people to be working?
Exactly. Um, Let's move on now, I think, to the piece of one of my favorite topics is really dispelling myths. Because whenever I'm speaking to someone who is new into cybersecurity, dabbling into the field, when I do share out a myth for them, I always get that great aha moment of, oh, I didn't know that. I had no idea. Thanks for sharing that with me. So it is quite rewarding. But in terms of the growing importance of cybersecurity, we've seen that certain myths about the field really discourage people from considering or pursuing a job in the industry. But are there any myths about working in cybersecurity that you'd like to dispel, Shelley? And what do you think that people, and specifically more people from underrepresented groups, should really consider pursuing a career in cybersecurity?
Well, when I think about cybersecurity, there is a real sense from people who, don't work in it every day that they're secure, that they're safe, that nobody knows what they're doing, and everything's going to be okay. And it's like, well, everything may be okay, but if you've got a cell phone or you're on a computer, somebody knows what you're doing. So you're always being watched or monitored. It's always amazing. Recently I lost a necklace, a valuable necklace at the airport when I checked in. And I knew that I had it when I entered the door. I also knew that I had it as I started to go through security, and somewhere there I lost it. And because it was quite a valuable necklace, they said, well, we'll contact our SOC because we have cameras on you from the moment you walk into the airport. So we'll be able to see the exact moment you lost it and if and who picked it up. And they did that. I'm like, now I know that in the back of my mind, but I thought, wow, they could watch me walk through the whole airport, every step I took as soon as I entered that door from the outside. So that was kind of cool that they tracked down my necklace like that.
Yeah.
They even realized who picked it up and walked away with it. I'm like, that's just like really awesome. And we were able to get it back. But I thought that, you know, and I know that, but until you have that experience where they're like, here you are, you did this, you did that. Wow, they really tracked me. You're totally tracked everywhere. And so for people to think people aren't watching, I think they have to realize that people are watching, and it's easy. It's easy to watch people now.
Mm-hmm.
And so we talk privacy. I'm like, yeah, there's not a whole lot of privacy anymore for a whole lot of people, other than my mother, who's probably not on anything, right? She's 87 years old, but the rest of the world that's on, and maybe they don't care, right? Maybe they're not as their conversations are different around privacy than the conversations I was exposed to around privacy. I remember having any camera on any street and in any building when that was a big deal. Now they're everywhere.
Mm-hmm. And most of the
So
time hidden, actually, right? Like if they
exactly.
back in the day, just taking us back to even the early 2000s, right?
Yep.
You see that there were cameras here and there. You kind of spot to know where they are in the kind of central, like public areas. But
Right.
now it's kind of safe to even assume that they're hidden and they're just pretty much everywhere. Like, for instance, on just over the weekend, and I had the opportunity to enjoy the beautiful sunshine that we have here in Ontario and go for a bit of a hike. And people were saying, what if we get lost on this trail? And I just told them, well, there's probably cameras around. And that's why there's a whole security team at the very front of the park that we saw. So it really goes to show that privacy component, I wouldn't say it's non-existent, but it's definitely been growing over the years at a
Right.
quite a rapid pace, actually.
Right. Yeah. And so then, how do you feel, when you ask a 20-year-old about privacy, their opinions are very different because their exposure has been very different than mine. Um, even the ability to get lost is kind of hard these days. If you have a cell phone, someone's tracking you everywhere you
Exactly.
go, right? So your cars, all our cars are being tracked, our vehicles. So it's for me, that's kind of like when people say, well, nobody knows what I'm doing. I'm like, yeah, don't ever think you're doing anything that nobody that does. I mean, you might not be doing anything exciting, so nobody's going to tell you they know it, but um, there's probably somebody tracking you at any given time, any day of the week.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just to add to that, I think that's what makes cybersecurity truly so unique. It's such a growing industry with so many aspects to it, right? We talked
Right.
a little bit about myths, the talent gap a little bit earlier. We talked about different perspectives to accommodate even the work environment, right? And to privacy. But what is one advice that you'd offer to members of diverse groups really entering professions into cybersecurity, especially for folks who are joining us on the line today?
You know, I would say don't give up on yourself. There's so much opportunity out there, and it's really about, if you're the person that's just filling out applications, I don't think that's enough anymore. I think that's part of the process. I can honestly say most jobs that I have gotten in my life have been they hired me and then they asked me for my resume because they needed it for my file, right? So if you're out there and you're thinking, I know I would do well in cybersecurity, or I've got some training and I want to be in cybersecurity, then you need to show up where there's cybersecurity people. And like I said before, there's a lot of, ISACA, ISC squared, WESIS, ISSA, so a lot of nonprofit organizations, community groups that meet. Show up there. You're interested. There's all kinds of people to talk to. If you're interested in training, a lot of HR departments will talk to you about, I just had someone who wanted to have a work at Lockheed Martin was their dream job. And so he said, can you connect me with somebody there? And I'm like, yeah, I'll connect you to the top of their training department because they're always looking for new people. Number one, there's lots of jobs to be filled. And if you're keen enough to be asking the questions and that's your spot, of course they want to talk to you. So really, I think there's a real active part in fulfilling where you want to be and where you want to end up. And so as individuals, you're now driving your car. So you decide, do I want to work for the government of Ontario? Who should I talk to? Who should I connect with? And don't give up
Mhm.
because someone like, maybe I'll connect with Shelley, maybe I'll connect with Julia. Well, Shelley and Julia will do their darndest to get back to you. But maybe there's somebody else that you're going to run into along the way. And so those are just all stepping stones. Just don't stop when that first person you reach out to doesn't respond. There's maybe 1,000 reasons why they didn't respond, and
Mhm.
none of those reasons had anything to do with you. So I think, you really need to connect. You really need to get yourself out there. It's hard to just do an application and get a job these days.
Yeah. And I've seen that so many times on a daily basis, actually, Shelley, in terms of, I've reached out to so and so about their career, like you advised, but they never responded back. And I do see the discouragement, right? And I just say,
Yeah,
well, you can try again. And you don't always have to look at the list of the people and the staff working at that organization and hit the kind of the the leader there, right? Just
right.
maybe just dumb it down. Maybe if you are a student, speak to another co-op student in that area, or maybe an advisor, an analyst in that field that can give you that perspective of how their life actually looks like, or their work life really looks like in their daily tasks,
Right.
rather than speaking to people at the top of the chain that will give you kind of a high level overview of their strategy and their approach, right? Which
Right.
is always good, but it's always good to get different perspectives and to again not be discouraged, keep on trying and trying again, but also get a variety of perspectives on that side. It's always going to be a benefit to you. It's never going to be a
Yeah.
loss.
Yeah, it's part of the be curious, and it's part of the, sometimes, in my past, I thought, oh, gee, I really think I'd like to work there. And then you start talking to people there and you're like, yeah, not so much. I don't think I want to work there. Because sometimes the culture doesn't fit. Sometimes, how they work doesn't fit. And so it's like, yeah, I don't really want to do that. So I think that's why I think, just reach out to a lot of, LinkedIn is a great resource. I love LinkedIn to, people just say, hey, I'd like 10 minutes of your time, talk to you about what it is that you do. I'm still that curious person that says, how'd you get that job? I think I'd love that job. Can you tell me about what you do?
Mhm.
And people will say, yeah, sure, like, this is what I do, or they'll direct me to somewhere else so I can read about it or hear more about it. So I think, um, for, do you, I would, I would be the bold one that say, do you need more women on your cybersecurity team? I'm here. Um, Maybe I'm the person you're looking for. Like, I think in today's world, being bold is okay. And it's probably the only way you're going to get heard.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I've definitely made some connections going back to the women's conference as well, of just asking people those questions. How did you get into the field? How did you get into, or your organization? Or can you teach me about something here?
Right.
And most of the time, fortunately, I've been getting a response of, I'd love to. Let's set up some time after this conference. Let's follow up on this discussion, and maybe I'll show you a little bit of a glimpse of some of the tools we're using, right? So it's always a positive, and it shows when you are passionate, when you're curious, and you're not coming off as, I'm an expert and I know it all. I think people are definitely more willing to kind of show you around, and that's certainly helped me in my career journey.
Right. Yeah. And I think the other thing when you're looking for, I mean, it's hard to hire people. I mean, I've been in the role where I've had to hire people. It's the worst job in the world, I think, being the HR person. Because it's hard because you're looking, if you're looking at paper or on the computer, you're like, well, is this one going to fit? Is this one really everything, that I'm reading? It's easier to hire someone that comes to you full of energy, full of curiosity, and says, yeah, I can do all these things. I'd really like to work here, but I don't know anything about this. And it's like, okay, I can teach you that, right? Because there are some skills that can be taught. Um, the showing up, the energy, the curiosity for the workplace and the work that you do, that can't be taught. So if you've got somebody that's doing that, and I can honestly say, when I did a lot of hiring, I hired the people that appeared to have the most energy and curiosity about the role. All the things that I thought I could teach them were like, good, I can teach them that. And I was comfortable with that. And that worked for me 100% of the time. Um, I didn't, their resumes only probably got them through the door some days. Some days on a phone call, I decide to interview them because of the conversation we had on the phone call. So, you have to, somebody the other day posted, like if you're doing a job interview and you're doing the job interview, there's some key things that you should know. You should be in front of your computer so that I can see you. You should not have your puppy on your lap licking your face while you're doing the job interview. You shouldn't be running out for lunch to pick up your lunch while you're doing your job interview. And I'm like, wow, people really do that in today's world. Like we think it's funny, but it's like, yeah, I know people that have come to job interviews like that saying, just a minute, I just got to go get my lunch. It's like they're going through the drive through. I'm like, okay, you knew you had this job interview. So how you show up makes a difference as well. So
Absolutely.
some of those things that were impactful 20 years ago are still impactful. It's how you show up. Are you interested? Can you give me your undivided attention for this job interview for the next hour? And some job interviews are grueling. They're multiple job interviews. Um, and you just have to be aware of how you're showing up.
Absolutely. It's not really the formal kind of on the rubric or the assessment for your job interview, but people do take note, right? In terms of,
Mhm.
how you kind of you enter the room, what are your priorities here, right? So
Right.
that does come into to play, and a lot greater than, that individual may think if they're, going down that route.
Right. Yeah. I mean, how you show up? Are you dressed up? Do you have a hoodie on over your head? Because if you're customer facing, they have an expectation and a brand that they're trying to protect. And maybe that brand isn't for you. Maybe it's a great job, but the brand's not for you. So you just have to be aware of those things as well.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a good point, and just going to take a few seconds here just to share my story in terms of being on the panel for interviews as we're scaling up
Mhm.
on the Ontario side here. We're almost tempted at this on the panel to say, okay, we see the first half because it's a virtual interview of you being in a blazer or a suit, but we're also kind of tempted to say, we're kind of curious. Can you maybe just stand up? Are you wearing pajama bottoms, or are you in a full outfit ready for this interview, regardless if you're seated or regardless if you're in person
Right.
or virtual?
Yeah. 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 I mean, so I traveled on a plane one time with somebody who was going to work in Seattle. He was coming from Winnipeg, Manitoba, dressed in a full suit, but he did not wear shoes or socks. So I thought, interesting. So I sat with him on the plane, and that was just something he did. There are a group of people that don't wear shoes or socks. And I thought, I bet you they never asked him if he wore shoes on the interview. He got the job and he was going to show up for work. And I'm just like, it's different, right?
Mhm.
Um, but I'm like, interesting. I would have loved to have been there when he showed up for work the first day. Um, but but yeah, we're all different, and recognizing that sometimes we don't fit in organizations, and that's okay too. Sometimes it's disappointing, but you just don't fit after a while, or you just like, yeah, I can't fit in there. That's not my workspace. So know you and know what you want
Absolutely.
is really key.
Yeah.
And then go for it.
Yeah, just taking your example, absolutely, Shelley, about you're taking hold of the steering wheel. You're in control of the steering wheel in your car, wherever you want to maneuver things, right? Wherever you
Right,
want to take things. How
right,
far are you going to take things, right? Like I often get the
yeah,
questions of, okay, so there's a deliverable, there's a project. What are your expectations of it? Well, this is kind of the baseline of what I'm thinking of where the project's going to take, but how are you adding value to it? What's your take on it? And where do you want to take or drive this forward
right,
on that side there?
yeah, yeah. You have to stand out. Everybody has to stand out. And I always say you're in charge of your career and where it takes you. And sometimes you got to be bold and make a lot of noise. And that
Mhm.
doesn't mean you're going to get that job, but that means as you get good at that, you will get the job. You will get a job, which is probably a better fit for you at the end of the day and allows you to build on your career. And that's why I say, when you look at workplaces, because there's a lot of workplaces that have, a DEI officer now, diversity, equity, inclusivity officer now in their workplaces. And as workplaces are trying to figure it out, and they are, a lot of workplaces are trying to figure it out. Um, they're not changing as fast as we would like them because when you need positions filled, you just want to fill them as fast as you can. And as we know, women don't tend to apply for a lot of the jobs. And so the men are getting the jobs still because, we just need to hire these people fast. And so women need to apply for the jobs, have a voice, make a phone call the
Yeah.
hiring people and say, I applied for a job and I want that job. And I hope I get an interview. Like you need to say those things. I met somebody in an Uber. He was an Uber driver, and he was studying to go into cybersecurity. And I said, well, where would you like to work? And he said, I'd love to work at Microsoft. And I said, well, why don't you go to Microsoft? I said, and find somebody to talk to there. They may even sponsor your training because a lot of workplaces will sponsor the training of women, minority groups, and new Canadians. They'll sponsor that training for you to get you in the workplace. I said, go. Don't wait till you're done your training and then try to get in. Go talk to somebody now while you're on the journey. Don't wait till the end.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't do it when it's too late, but also doing it earlier has no harm in doing that. In
That's
terms
right.
if you're confused in terms of, what's the timing of this, right? So
Right. Yeah.
it's always having a game plan in sight and taking hold of your career.
Yes.
All right. On that note, thank you so much, Shelley, for all of your insightful responses. Always really nice to connect with you, and it was a pleasure to meet you in person not too long ago. I'm hoping that there could be another event where we could reconnect and continue this conversation. But I do see there's a lot of questions queued up here in the chat from our audience today. So let's take a few minutes to transition over to the questions.
Okay.
All right. So our first question here that we have is what part can allies play in helping increase the amount of diversity seen in this industry? Shelley, you take such an so that's the next question. That's the first question, sorry. Is helping increase the amount of diversity seen in this industry. I think we talked a little bit about that in terms of it starts a lot with the leaders providing the direction, hearing the issues, coming up with solutions together from staff. But is there anything else that you'd like to add on to that piece there, Shelley, on that question?
You know what? I think there's a lot of great programs. There's a Rogers Cybersecurity Catalyst, which is, nationwide now. So individuals who are looking into cybersecurity, should reach out to the Rogers Cybersecurity Catalyst and apply for those roles for training. Like I said, a lot of nonprofit community organizations are also, there's a lot of value. There's scholarships. So there's lots of opportunities for training and connecting. And I think part of our responsibility is to make sure our voices are heard and to make sure that we show up. Um, and so I would really encourage people to get active, to apply. SANS has, vet success academies that are just opening up. People just need to start applying.
Mhm. Certainly. Thanks, Shelley. So moving on to our next question that's very Shelley specific. Shelley, you take such an active role in conferences. I saw you at the Canadian Women's Conference as well. How do these conferences assist you in your work? I think that's a great question.
How do they assist me in my work? Well, I've never been one to be happy being in one spot thinking I know everything, because I think the world has a bigger story to tell always. So, one of the things that I've done my entire life, whether it was when I was in nursing, social work, public life, is I have always been involved in my community as a volunteer, as someone, as a board member, and giving back, because that allows me to grow. I know a lot of people say, well, Shelley can add that value, but for me personally, I get so much out of it. So when I am able to be part of CyberX and that community and watch with that group of people, right? They're different group of people that I'm working with there or in conversations with there who are in the cybersecurity world, all with different roles. It allows me to continue to learn. It allows me to get better at what I do. It allows me to see, what is happening with COVID in the workplace. I hear it from the customers that I deal with from my SANS perspective. When they talk to me as someone from SANS. When I'm out with other groups and organizations and volunteering, I'm hearing it from other people. When I go volunteer at the food bank, I'm getting another perspective. So for me, I think everybody should volunteer and give back to their community for various reasons, but because I think it's a great learning opportunity. It's a great opportunity for you to learn and take on others' perspectives and to really see what's happening. So for me, being part of CyberX, going to conferences, that's energizing. I mean, I go to conferences all by myself where I don't know a soul just to learn. And I go to conferences on all kinds of different things, not just cybersecurity, because I just want to learn. And cybersecurity touches everything and everyone, regardless of which conference you're going to. So I really encourage people to keep learning, self-learning and giving back to your communities.
Great, thanks very much, Shelley. And that is absolutely refreshing to hear, especially around, your passion and your desire to continue to learn. As many people have come across to say, Shelley, you've achieved a lot in your past career. Is there any more room for growth, right? And probably most people don't see it, and it's great that you expand beyond the cybersecurity realm. making sure you're an active volunteer member for your community to benefit your community. But on that stroke there, you're also adding in different skill sets to learn. And for myself, I am a huge advocate for volunteerism. I think it's definitely beneficial for any type of volunteerism work that you do. But that's how I started off in terms of volunteering, of building my network, not only in that piece there. That wasn't the original intention, but after that, I did see there's actually a lot of perks there. And that's where I got those conversations of, how about you look into your career in IT? And how about you take your policy background, your communications background, and bring it to the IT side? Because you've got all the techs, but they need someone like you in place to actually relay that information.
Right.
And that's
Yeah.
also my aha moment.
Yeah, I think sometimes if we try too hard to plan our journey, we don't have the opportunities. I didn't plan my life journey. As soon as my guidance counselor told me that I couldn't be a pilot, I was done. I'm like, huh, I was planning to be a pilot and fly those jets across the skies. And then I was told that, Shelley, you're female, you wear glasses, you're not going to do that. You should be a nurse. I thought life was over. And then I thought, no, I'm just going to experience everything in life. There must be a place I fit. And, that has led me to have an incredible journey, and incredible opportunities, but only because I kept seeking and I kept wanting to learn about, more and different things. If I wasn't where I was almost 9 years ago, I wouldn't have got into cybersecurity. Cybersecurity was never on my roadmap. And so I think for individuals that are out there trying to learn and trying to figure out, where do I fit in? How do I get this job? I think you just need to show up at different places, um, be open. Your skills will rise to the top, new skills will come into play, and people will start to select you and ask you to do things. And that's when you say yes, even when your head says no, that's when you just say yes
Mhm.
and you do it and see where it takes you.
For sure. All right, it looks like we're just in time for a few more questions left here in queue. Our next question is actually a really interesting take on this. How can we get seniors or even retired folks into cybersecurity? We talked about folks who are entering into the field or developing their new career in cybersecurity, but they can play such a key role in being ambassadors for safer seniors online. Shelley, I know that SANS has different programs there. I'm not too sure if this is something that, you guys have worked on, so I'll pass it to
Right.
you to get your opinions on this one.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because um, through society, the active workforce is different in today's world. So I'm one of those people who never wanted to retire because I thought, well, doing what you like every day and people paying you, that's not really work. So I'm one of those people in life. And so retirement was never part of my thing. But as I've aged, I have noticed, when we talk about hiring people, who are we looking at? We're looking at hiring young people. But I think having that other voice, so I recently went to a hotel, nice hotel, where they changed everything into high tech in the hotel, expensive hotel. And so even the doors had this code that you had to put in, but it was silver with white light all in the background, dark hallways, right? And I said to my husband, I said, there's not going to be a lot of young people coming to this hotel and spending their money because it's way too expensive. But I said, anyone that is visually impaired, which would be a lot of people 50 plus, aren't going to see these little numbers to open these doors in these dark hallways. I said, this is like really poor planning. And so I said, they probably, were just a bunch of young people sitting around thinking this is cool technology. We should do this in our hotel. We should make this hotel like this. But I'm like, who's your customer that's paying with money? Any studies you read, it's like, seniors have all the money and they have money to spend. So I'm like, yeah. So I think there is value in having all ages around you. I mean, when I go to CyberX conferences, that is the win for me. There are a ton of young people there. Young, when I say young, they're college, university students there trying to get into the field of cybersecurity or figure out if they want to be in the field of cybersecurity. So that's the win for me because I'm not around a lot of those people anymore. Most people I'm around are in their 30s, 40s, and 50s. right? So I'm looking for those young people and I'm looking for those older people so they don't get left behind,
Yep.
or that I don't get left behind, maybe. So I think, it is cool that we need to look at what is the face of our workplace. Look at the advertising that's out there. So, they've added some diversity, but yeah, they took out some of the older people. And I still think there's value and that they want to have a place in our society. And they have. So we have to just continue to have a voice.
Exactly. And I think it certainly adds on to the point that cybersecurity is everyone's responsibility. How do seniors, how do, folks at the retirement demographic play a role in it? And how do we give them a role where they can say, look at me. I'm probably not as technologically advanced. I don't want to play any stereotypes here, but there's a few folks in the demographic that find that they're not as involved with technology as the younger demographics. And I think we can agree on that piece there. But it's like their voice would probably make a bigger impact because they are putting cybersecurity as their priority. They're telling their family, they're telling their friends, and they're probably telling their circle of the awareness pieces on that side. And I was actually thinking about that. How do we secure some of our retirement homes, right? And it probably starts off with having the staff there raise awareness about cybersecurity, kind of really dumbing it down, the basics of the importance of cybersecurity and what are some general tips that they need to watch out for, especially if they're on social media platforms. I think everyone these days probably have an iPad and an iPhone. We just got my grandma an iPhone and she's still navigating through it and she's 90. So
Yeah.
um, I think that sends a really clear message once we get to that point of making sure that when we are talking about diversity, we're talking about all demographics and not just, oh, how do we get the younger demographic on board?
Right. I think, when I used to work in occupational therapy years ago, and I used to and yeah, this was like years ago. Now you brought this back to me, and I was in a seniors home. Um and we played crib on the computer as a game. And because it was something, it wasn't about the computer and learning about the computer. It was about, you know, the individual being able to interact and play a game that he liked to play, even though there wasn't anyone to play crib with him all day and all night long when he wanted to play crib. So we got him onto a game on the computer. And so I think when we're introducing it, I think it's important to be aware of the value it's giving to the user. I take you back to the example of my mother in the bank. For my mom, going to the bank is social interaction. So for them to say, you got to learn to do this on the phone, my mom's like, no, I want to come here and talk to Julia. I come here every Friday and say hi to Julia and I'd say hello to all of you. And so that part of her life is really important. What they're telling her is don't come anymore. That's what she's hearing. So I think when you look at, nursing homes, even with families who can't be there with their loved ones that are in the nursing homes, how do we communicate? How do we use technology to better communicate and allow families to see in nursing homes? I know a lot of families that put cameras up now so that they can watch.
Yeah.
That is not out of a need to service the user. That was out of a need of, you know, families wanting to make sure mom or dad was okay. Like the reason it came to be was unfortunate. It was too bad it couldn't have been the other way. Shelley lives in Calgary. Her dad is in Thunder Bay, Ontario. How can we make sure Shelley has eyes on her dad?
Mhm.
Why don't we set up a feed where they can connect? So having those conversations and staying connected, I think would be very positive in lots of areas. And that's why when we look at cybersecurity, that's when we look at technology, it's all age groups and understanding from their perspective what they need.
Yep, certainly. And yeah, this is actually a very interesting, topic here that, we haven't really got in depth with so
Right.
far on this side here, but definitely a really important discussion to play. I think we're in time for one more last question, Shelley, if you're still good on time.
Yep.
Is I think we talked a little bit a bit about this, but maybe this is more of a detailed in terms of what are your recommendations to attract young talent into cybersecurity in terms of probably the high school demographic and high school courses?
Attracting young talent. Well, I think, there are a lot of programs out there. There's a lot, at SANS, we have CyberStar Games where we do games for young people. We have the big hunt at pen testing hunt at Christmas time that we offer free to people. I would say getting young people engaged is also involves engaging the school, the teachers in the school, and educating them. I think it also involves educating the parents to be okay with allowing their children to be on the computer, to see the positivity in it. I have a friend, her daughter does graphics on the computer like nobody else can. And she's 12 years old, and they're like, I gotta get her off the computer. I'm like, no, she's so talented. You've just got to take those skills and find a place or a program for her to fit in and use those skills. There's summer camps. And so really encourage and explore where that can take you, and just having an open mind. I think, COVID created a bit of a response because all of a sudden everybody had to be at home on computers. And then we became aware of all the issues around having a computer at home and communicating in the school system. And so I think the continuing to educate, conversations, and being involved is key.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think so that piece there is just more of, looking at opportunities, whether it's the conferences or webinars. There's a ton of them out there now. And there's been a ton ever since we started working remotely. So taking advantage of those sessions there in terms of just to kind of pique your interest, dabble onto
Yes.
LinkedIn Learning, right? That's always a key there. And I've taken a few courses there myself out of curiosity as well, and just to see, is there a few things there that I haven't come across that I can probably learn and take from this, even if it's like at the cybersecurity basics level, right? That I can use this in my role and in my work. All right, so I think I see that we are now at time. This does conclude our Cyber Talk session. And again, it's wonderful to have you back, Shelley. And thank you very much for giving your time, your advice, and of course, a special thank you to those who've watched and participated and taken the hour of your day today to join us and ask the really important questions of how do we expand diversity and inclusion within the cyberspace. But I do hope that you do walk away from today's session with, of course, greater awareness about the importance of diversity in cybersecurity realm, as well as lifting up those around us to help achieve those goals. And do consider a career in cybersecurity, and do ask those challenging questions. Do be curious. Do take on the steering wheel of the car that where you want to maneuver and where you want to take your career, and put it more on you in terms of where you want to take things. All right, on this note, make sure to join us next month for another cybersecurity session with a new guest lined up. But in the meantime, stay cyber safe, and see you guys soon.
Thanks.